Just a few days ago, a video game was released that would spark widespread controversy around games journalism and access media. That game was Mixtape. The game received overwhelming praise, with many outlets calling it a Game of the Year contender. Notably absent from these reviews, however, was any mention of the actual gameplay experience, with most reviews focusing on the nostalgic 90s soundtrack, the coming-of-age story elements, or the art style of the game. And I think this poses a larger question that the games industry has been wrestling with for a long time. One that involves consistent standards in game review scores, disclosure of paid incentives for high praise reviews, and perhaps the most important question of them all, which is, what is a video game? Now, if you look at the dictionary definition for the term video game, usually comes down to this. A video game is an interactive experience that requires user input to move the story or action forward. That interactivity is key to what separates a game from other media, such as films or books. Now, obviously, there is a spectrum when it comes to user interaction. A game like Doom, for example, is much more dependent on player input than, say, something like a Telltale game, but that interactivity is still a requirement. It's not optional. If you strip away the user input, what you have is just an expensive animated movie. Take away the visuals too, and all you have left is an audiobook. It's really important to remember these things when critiquing a game, because how something is presented in its chosen medium is often just as important as the content itself. Films are judged not just by the quality of their story, but by their cinematography. Books, likewise, are judged equally by their prose and use of words as they are the actual storytelling. For some reason, though, this same logic doesn't often extend to video game reviews. In fact, more often than not, game journalists will completely ignore the game aspect of a video game, instead choosing to focus on things like art direction, writing quality, etc., but completely ignoring any discussion about the actual interactive experience, which is the part that makes it a video game. So how does all of that apply to Mixtape? Well, let's first establish a baseline for what Mixtape is. Mixtape is a game from Australian developer Beethoven Dinosaur, and is published by Annapurna Interactive. The game tells a coming-of-age story following a trio of high school friends on their last night together in a stylized 90s California town. The game makes heavy use of licensed music and stop-motion inspired visuals in an effort to present itself as a high-quality indie project. Coming in at about 3 hours long, it is a shorter experience that tries to focus more on storytelling than challenging gameplay. And you might be thinking, well, that's totally fine. There are plenty of games that exist on the lower end of the spectrum when it comes to interactivity, and Mixtape is far from the first game to care more about its story than its gameplay, but that's where the issue lies. Mixtape doesn't have any actual gameplay whatsoever. Just take a look at this clip I found on Twitter proving this point.
Look, I'm finna expose this game right quick. I gotta expose it, because I've played at least the first 30 minutes of the game, and I feel like I ain't did nothing. It says best experience on a controller. Let me tell you how this is clickbait. Y'all gonna see this in real time. Now mind you, I'm using the Xbox controller. Number one, you can't skip it. I'm gonna just do this the whole time. I do not know how this game got a 10 out of 10. You're not really playing it. It's a movie. Watch this scene. I'm holding my hand up. I'm not doing nothing. The game guides you. It directs you. You don't have to actually play the damn game. I'm finna walk away. I'm finna put the controller down. I'm back. I went to gotta get some water. I don't have to do anything.
As you can see, the sections that are presented to the player as interactive gameplay segments in Mixtape don't actually require any user input to proceed. In fact, other than the occasional press of the A button, you can pretty much leave the controller on your lap for the entire experience. The game has no fail states, no puzzles to solve, nothing. If pressing the A button to continue qualifies as gameplay, then that would mean a Netflix movie can be called a game because it asks you if you're still watching every few hours, and you can't actually continue watching without selecting yes. But that's obviously ridiculous. A Netflix movie is a movie, not a video game. So why aren't we applying that rule here? That's why it was such a shock to everyone when all of the journalists and reviewers came out with their 10 out of 10 scores for Mixtape, calling this the best game of the year and a masterpiece in video game storytelling. It beat out actual gameplay-heavy experiences like Resident Evil Requiem and Pragmata, both of which masterfully weave good storytelling into their gameplay mechanics. After all, how could a game that doesn't actually require you to play it be considered a mastery of the craft? The answer is simple. It can't. Could a book without words be considered well written? Or a movie with no visuals be eligible for the Oscars? No, they couldn't. So why are video games the exception? If you go to many of these reviews and Control F the word gameplay, you'll see that it doesn't even appear in many of the reviews. Instead, they're full of praise for the quote emotional depth of the story, the soundtrack integration, nostalgic vibes. But none of those things make it a video game. You would think that people who review video games for a living would understand that distinction, but apparently not. And you might be thinking, well, that's okay, I don't pay attention to the mainstream review outlets like IGN or Kotaku. I watch independent YouTubers. And I hate to break it to you, but they are just as compromised as the mainstream news sources, if not more. People like Luke Stevens, Destin Legary, and SkillUp, who built a name for themselves over the years by providing independent and honest game coverage, have been showering just as much praise onto Mixtape. In fact, many of them went so far as to do paid promotions and interviews for the game and failed to disclose all of the incentives they had to give the game glowing praise. Many fans rightfully saw this as a betrayal of their trust and integrity that they had built their public image on, and the unfortunate reality is that many of these influencers are part of the same marketing clique that companies such as IGN or GameSpot are. When a company sets their marketing budget for influencers, it includes independent YouTubers in addition to those organizations. So no matter what you think of your favorite YouTuber, they are not immune to being bribed and sucked into the circle jerk that has become the games journalism industry. This highlights the ever-growing rift between games journalists and people who actually play video games for fun. When critic scores on average are several points away from user scores, then we have to ask ourselves, what point do games journalists even serve? In recent history, user scores have been a far more accurate representation of critical and commercial success than anything. How many games can you think of that got a 9 or 10 from IGN, only for the studio to shut down a month later because the game completely flopped? At this point, games journalism is a relic of an era that no longer exists, a time where reviewers represented the average gamer and gave honest feedback about whether a game was worth purchasing or not. Now, developers and journalists only exist to pat each other on the back and tell each other what a good job they did, while covering their ears to ignore the feedback from people who are actually buying their product. You even have official publisher accounts like Xbox chiming in to say that just because a game isn't for you doesn't make it a bad game. And it couldn't be any more clear here that there is a massive industry push to paint this game as a success, and anyone caught deviating from that script is seen as an outcast. Fact is, this isn't just about Mixtape. This is a symptom of a larger issue that has been brewing in the games industry for several years now. And with the recent return of people like Anita Sarkeesian, we continue to see both developers and journalists deliberately disrespect their actual customer base who made them successful in the first place. Games journalism is now nothing but access media, where positive coverage of one game ensures that review codes keep coming in and ad revenue keeps flowing on their review videos. The end result is a massive erosion of consumer trust. When a game that literally plays itself is hailed as a Game of the Year contender, it just goes to show that the industry doesn't actually understand the medium that it creates and critiques. So why should consumers use their reviews to make financial decisions about what games to purchase and which ones to skip? The answer is they shouldn't. So why does any of this matter? Well, what's at stake here is the future of honest coverage in the games industry. If we're not already there, we are nearing a future where dissenting voices are silenced and everyone is given the same script to follow. Like I said, if we're not already there, it is not far off. And this doesn't just harm players and their wallets, it actively discourages developers from making good games, because it shows that they can get glowing praise and heaps of awards for doing the bare minimum. So why would anybody ever innovate? The fact is that thoughtful critique helps the medium grow by holding all parts of the ecosystem accountable. That includes developers, publishers, and especially journalists. At the end of the day, you can enjoy the story of Mixtape, While I personally found it to be poorly written and the visuals to be nauseating to look at, I can understand that those things are ultimately subjective. What is not up for debate is that Mixtape is just fundamentally not a video game. It is a glorified animated movie and absolutely not deserving of any of the praise it gets for being a video game. And no matter how you feel about the game, you can't deny that the disconnect here reveals deeper problems in games journalism that deserve to be called out and explained. In the future, I do hope we can get to a place where games journalists actually represent the players they provide reviews for, and that game developers can go back to actually making good gameplay experiences. But with the recent toxic positivity infestation that we're seeing from games like Highguard to Mixtape, I do think that that future is a long way off if it ever happens at all. With all of that said, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you played Mixtape, and what do you think it says about the disconnect between gamers and journalists today? If you enjoyed the video and would like to see more industry discussions like this, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, and let me know what else you'd like to see me cover in the future. I'm always looking for new topics to cover in videos, and as always, I just want to say thank you so much for watching. And with all of that said, I will see you guys in the next one. Take care.